Good evening, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining the meeting today. I'll be doing the meeting, uh, and it will be about bird photography. Wait. Last time we introduced you to the bird photography field, and we also taught you about the exposure triangle and how to control it. So, what will we do today? We will teach you about exposure modes and when to use them, and when to use them when photographing birds. And we will also teach about the driver modes which should use to when photographing birds. So let's first look at exposure modes. What are exposure modes? Exposure modes helps us to control the exposure triangle easily in the preferred methods. So there are lots of exposure modes uh, in a camera. It takes so these are some manual mode. In the manual mode, you have to do every function. You have to set every function of the camera manually by yourself. And in the aperture priority mode, you can set aperture to yourself, your interest, and the camera will set the rest. And in the shutter priority mode, you have to set the shutter speed. In the program mode, there are different. It has some different settings of its own, and there are something like bulb mode, automatic mode, special scene mode, custom mode, and creative filter mode. So we can't use all the modes in here for bird photography. There are some few of them can be used. They are ideal. So let's see what are they. So these are some specific exposure modes that we can use to use in bird photography, and these are aperture priority mode, shutter priority mode, automatic mode, program mode, and the custom mode. So I'll explain them now. So let's first look at aperture priority mode. Aperture priority mode is the best mode that can be used that we can use to photograph birds. This because you can control the aperture and the ISO level. Because aperture, when you can control the aperture, that means you can also control the depth of field. Means so you can uh, focus the bird you're shooting, the focus the object that you're shooting well. And after you do that, the camera will choose the relevant shutter speed and other things. So how do you take pictures in aperture priority mode? You'll have to use a larger aperture because in bird photography, bird photography, photographing birds, birds are not just an animal. They have high metabolism, so they are very fast moving creatures. So you need to have a high shutter speed. And as the camera sets the shutter speed in this mode, so you have to use a larger aperture because it lets in more light. So hence having a higher shutter speed. It also increased the depth of field, focusing the bird well, distinguishing it from the background. So it's ideal for the ideal for bird photography. So these are some pictures taken using aperture priority mode. The bird on the top here, it's called the ash-shaded laughing thrush. It's endemic to Sri Lanka, and the bird below is, I think you all know him. It's a jungle fowl. Uh, so let's go on. So let's look at shutter priority mode. Sh- Shutter priority mode is the second best mode for bird photography. I mean, in this mode, you can choose the shutter speed and the ISO level, and the camera will do the rest. So you can use high shutter speed for fast moving birds, and but the disadvantage is you can't control the aperture in this mode. So you won't be able to control the depth of field because of that. So sometimes if you use high shutter speeds, well, not sometimes, not high shutter speeds, sometimes the depth of field can be bit higher, so it will also focus some of the objects in the background. So this is how we choose shutter priority mode in Nikon cameras. It's in the letter S, and in Canon cameras it's shown as TVO. And I also forgot that in aperture priority mode in Canon cameras it's shown as AV, and in aperture priority mode in Nikon cameras are shown as just caps lock A, capital A. So how do you take pics in shutter priority mode? Uh, you have to adjust to a considerably high shutter speed because, as I told you before, birds are fast moving creatures. So, and there's another advantage using high shutter speed because it will also increase the size of aperture. So it will reduce the depth of field. Ideal. And using the shutter priority mode, you can photograph extremely fast birds like hummingbirds and sunbirds. So this bird on the top is the species of hummingbird. It's called velvet swearbill, and the bird on the bottom picture is a Lotan sunbird. It's in, you can see in Sri Lanka. So let's move on. Program mode. So program in this so in this program mode, you can automatically yeah, the camera will automatically set the exposure triangle. We mean aperture, shutter speed, and the ISO level, and uh, you can do the other settings. Like driver mode and image quality and such. And the disadvantage is because you don't have the control of the exposure triangle. Yeah. So in program mode, you don't have to control the exposure triangle. You only need to control other settings. So because of this, this mode is good for starters of bird photography because they might have low knowledge on the exposure triangle. But the disadvantage, as I mentioned earlier, you don't have the control of the exposure triangle, and sometimes the camera might choose a high ISO level, making the image grainy or noisy. As you can see in this photo, this is a photo of a blue-tailed beat taken using the program mode. And I think you can see some, grain in this photo because it used an high ISO level. So let's look at the automatic mode. In the automatic mode, the camera controls everything from exposure to color and depth of field. So this mode is ideal for starters. Well, the downside is you don't have any control of the image. As the camera does everything, you don't have the control of the exposure. Sometimes it might lower the quality of the image. So how to take pictures in automatic mode? So there's almost nothing for us to do in the automatic mode other than just pushing the shutter button at the right time. So because of this mode is good for starters. Now let's look at custom mode. In the custom mode, you can set the camera as needed and save that setting so you can use them when needed. It's something like if you photograph a bird and save that setting in this custom mode, you can use it again when you are photographing a bird. So when needed, and other times you can use other settings. So this mode is kind of ideal for ones who already know about the bird photography, know something about bird photography. Let me go on. So how to take pictures in custom mode. So you can set a particular aperture size, shutter speed, and ISO level, and other settings, and save them in the custom mode. And then you can shoot birds using this mode when you need it. And there are normally two custom modes, so you can save two custom settings at one time. So many bird photographers use this mode too, and this is not from custom mode. This is from an aperture priority mode, but uh, picture from a custom mode will look like this too. This bird is a crested serpent eagle. So let's look at driver modes. So driver modes are the methods of shooting a photograph. You know how it shoots one by one or burst of photos like that. So there are several driver modes: single shot driving mode, continuous shooting, high speed continuous shooting, and self timer. So these are the most common driver modes. There are other ones, but only in few cameras. So the best, if you take the best driver mode, high speed continuous shooting is the best for bird photography because it can take bursts of photos at high speed. Uh, so you, chances of getting a good photo is high, and the the problem is this high speed continuous shooting is only available in few cameras, very expensive ones. Normally, in if you take overall in every camera, the best interest is the continuous shooting. Well, in the continuous shooting, the speed is bit lower than of the high speed continuous shooting, but still it's enough to get a great photograph of a bird. So, so these are the modes and their symbols. So this one with the single square is single shot. As it's not ideal for bird photography. So this one with many squares and the letter H in the side is the high speed continuous shooting mode. That's the most ideal mode for bird photography. And this is continuous mode, continuous shooting mode. And this is silent single shot. Actually, it's not available in most cameras. And this is silent continuous mode. It's also not available in most cameras. This is self timer modes and their variants. This is 10-second timer. This is the 2-second self timer, and this is the custom timed self timer. So that's it for today. I did explain to you about the driver modes and the exposure modes now. So if you have any questions, send them to the chat box. So there's a question, I think, can we use manual mode also in bird photography? Right. Uh, so manual mode is in the manual mode we have to control every part of the camera. So as I told you earlier, birds are not and just humans. They won't stay in one place at all. So if you so we have to set in manual photography, you have to set aperture, ISO, uh, shutter speed, all of that, and it will take some time for you to set that for an ideal condition. So and most of the time the bird will fly away while you're doing that. So manual mode is not ideal for bird photography. I mean, most people use aperture priority or shutter priority or the custom modes. uh, well, you can use manual mode for other things like portrait or landscape. There's another question asking, what are the exposure triangle settings when you take bird photos in dark jungle or in late afternoon? um well, if you take dark jungle, you can use shutter priority, as you can use a or higher shutter speed, or you can just use the aperture priority mode, because both aperture priority mode can be formidable for both these environments. And there's another question asking, what is the advantage of using high speed continuous driver mode? As I told you, high speed driver mode and high speed continuous driver mode can take burst of photos in quickly. So the advantage is there's a high chance of you getting lots of good photos of the bird in single shot, and also you can also get many photos as so yes, that's you can get many photos as possible, and there's a chance that you can get lots of high quality photos. And in single shot sometimes you might get a blurry photos, so and you might never get a photo of that bird again. That's why single shot is not ideal for single shot is not ideal for bird photography. Any more questions? So that is asking how to use ISO in a dark jungle while taking bird photos. ISO is a factor that uh, influences the sensitivity of the sensor. So you can, uh, well, for if you need a high quality photo, you should not use that much ISO because ISO can sometimes make the image noisy, as I shown you earlier. So in using ISO, it's better to use somewhere between 1000 to 3000 to 3200 and a higher aperture when you are taking photographs of birds in a dark jungle and using a shutter speed of 125th of a second. Any more questions? If you have questions, ask them. Yeah, it's better to ask your questions quickly. So there's a question asking what is exposure compensation? I'm and I'm not aware of that. I don't know that much about exposure compensation. Uh, and it's more like about uh, the relationship between the exposure triangle and so so- and I'm not sure about what is exposure compensation because I don't know much about that. I think it is the relationship between the exposure triangle and the exposure modes and images. That is what I think because I think exposure compensation is the relationship between the exposure triangle and mm, uh, the exposure modes. I'm not sure of it. So yeah, any more questions? So it looks like there's no more questions. So I think it's time for us to wind up this lecture. So thank you everyone for joining this meeting, and I hope you will join for our future meetings too. So until our next meeting, goodbye for you everyone. I hope you join too.